My name is Maya Arden, and the night I realized my family might let me die, the snow on my father's porch was turning the color of rust under my knees. I remember the way the cold snapped at my skin as if it wanted a piece of me. The wind pushed sideways, needling through my coat until it reached the thin fabric stretched over my belly. I kept one arm wrapped under it, trying to shield the baby, while the other pounded against the glass door. It didn't matter. The lights inside stayed warm and bright, untouched by the storm outside, or the blood sliding down my leg. Through the frosted panel, I could see my father and my brother standing at the dining room table, crystal glasses in hand. Perfect posture. The kind of picture you'd find in a magazine about successful American families. Ethan laughed, first sharp, careless, almost delighted, before lifting his drink as if he were saluting me. My father didn't even bother pretending. He just turned away, muttering something I couldn't hear. The contraction tore through me so hard I had to brace against the railing. I bit down on a cry, partly because of the pain, partly because I refused to give them the satisfaction of hearing it. My phone had died minutes earlier. The storm had drowned the neighborhood in silence, and I knew no one was coming unless fate decided to be kind for once. I pressed my forehead to the door and whispered, "Please, just let me inside. Just until the bleeding stops." My breath fogged the glass, a small cloud swallowed by the golden light behind it. That's when headlights cut across the driveway. A car door slammed, and a man's voice, controlled, steady, unmistakably furious, broke through the storm. "Maya. Oh God. What did they do to you?" Everything after that was darkness. But I remember one thing clearly. The man who found me wasn't family. He was the one person capable of destroying everything my family had ever built. The morning after the storm, as the haze of hospital lights faded, the past few weeks returned with a clarity that stung. I had spent that month drifting like a ghost through the glass halls of Arden Built Group, the company my family treated like inheritance while treating me like an afterthought. Every Wednesday I slipped into the boardroom early simply because it was the only moment it felt quiet enough to breathe. My father always sat at the head of the table, commanding as if even the leather deferred to him. Ethan sat at his right, scrolling, nodding before my father even finished speaking. My seat nearest the door was an unspoken reminder that I didn't belong at the center of anything they valued. I told myself the work mattered more, that if the designs were good enough someday, they would see me. But someday never came. The last project they stole from me had been the breaking point. I'd spent months on it, sketching through sleepless nights while Logan brought me tea. When the project won an award, the papers printed Ethan's name in bold. Mine appeared once buried, labeled supporting staff. Logan urged me to speak up. I didn't nod out of fear, but because some part of me still hoped my father would acknowledge me if I stayed quiet long enough. After Logan died, silence became unbearable. Grief hollowed me out. Responsibility filled the space, and I kept showing up at Arden Built, letting them call me emotional or unfocused, hiding my pregnancy under oversized blazers, pretending this place had ever been home. It never was, and in that loneliness, a new idea began to grow soft at first, then sharper. A life outside Arden. A name outside theirs. A future that didn't need their permission. The first time Dr. Feldman said preeclampsia, risk the ground shifted beneath me. Grief was slow. This was immediate, dangerous. She stood in her cramped exam room, arms crossed the monitor, still showing my blood pressure spike. If it climbs higher, she warned, we're talking seizures, placental abruption, or worse. She didn't say death, but it hung there anyway. I promised to reduce stress, though we both knew I couldn't. Logan was gone. Money was thin, and Arden Built turned every day into a test. When she handed me the invoices for extra monitoring, my chest tightened. High-risk care required a guarantor unless I could access my mother's trust. The $2 million meant for my independence, but my father held the only signature. "Do you have family who can help?" she asked. I nodded automatically, the easy lie in a country where people assume families show up when needed. Mine never had. That night, the medical forms lay under my kitchen light. I traced the space where a guarantor's signature belonged, hands shaking at the thought of asking my father. But the baby didn't get to choose her family. She only had me. When Ethan texted about dinner at Dad's, it felt less like an invitation, and more like a lifeline I didn't want, but desperately needed. I slipped the forms into my bag. Whatever waited in that house, I'd face it, for her. By the next evening, the sky over Chicago had turned steel gray. The forecast warned of plunging temperatures and lake-effect snow, but I told myself the drive to my father's house would be quick. One hand stayed on the wheel, the other over the baby, trying to steady the unease tightening my abdomen in sharp, breath-stealing cramps. Charles Arden's house stood at the end of a long, tree-lined drive, more monument than home. Its tall windows glowed against the storm, almost enough to make family dinner feel real. That illusion vanished when Ethan opened the door. He reeked of expensive whiskey, his investor-ready smile already in place. "Didn't think you'd actually show," he said. My fingers tightened around the medical paperwork hidden in my coat. "You said family dinner," I reminded him. "Yeah, for family," he laughed. Inside, my father sat at the dining table, swirling wine, barely glancing up as snow dripped from my coat. I stepped in anyway, heat rushing over me as my vision wavered. "I need a minute." Charles finally looked up. "If this is another emotional episode, I'm not entertaining it." "It's not," I said, pulling out the forms. "Dr. Feldman wants to admit me. She needs a guarantor. I can't access the trust without your signature." He didn't touch the papers. "The trust is for the company's future, not impulsive medical bills." "It's not impulsive," I whispered. A stronger cramp tore through me. "I'm bleeding. I have been for an hour." Ethan frowned, annoyed. "If you're trying to guilt-trip Dad, I'm trying to stay alive," I snapped. Silence settled, the kind that seals fate. Then my father stood. "Not to help, just to leave. If you can't handle your own decisions," he said, brushing my hand only to push the papers aside, "don't expect us to clean them up." In that moment, I realized the storm outside wasn't nearly as cold as the one I'd walked into. The moment my father brushed past me, something in the house shifted. Ethan stepped forward, not to help, but to usher me out, like an inconvenience. I braced myself on the doorway, another sharp pain twisting through my side. "Dad." I tried breath thin. "Please, let me stay until the bleeding stops. I'll call the hospital from here. I just need—" He didn't wait. "You made your bed. Lie in it." Ethan smirked. "Maybe fresh air will clear your head." He nudged the door firm enough to push me onto the porch. A warm trickle slid down my thigh as I caught the railing. My father closed the door fully and locked it, the click cutting through the storm. Wind sliced through my coat. Snow stung my skin. I pounded the glass. "Ethan, I am bleeding. Do you hear me? Open the door." Inside, he raised his wine glass in a lazy mock toast. My father didn't turn, just walked back to the table untouched by the chaos outside. I reached for my phone, but it was dead. I pressed a shaking hand to the door, searching for warmth, finding none. Snow gathered in my hair and lashes. My knees buckled and I sank onto the top step because standing hurt too much. I don't know how long I stayed there, rocking with each contraction, whispering to my baby, even as fear crawled up my spine. Time blurred. My breath grew shallow. My fingers went numb. Eventually, I stopped knocking. It didn't matter. Then, through the storm's roar, I heard tires crunching over ice. Headlights swept across the drive. A car door slammed. Footsteps hurried toward me. "Maya." A man's voice, shocked, then angry. "Jesus. Maya, look at me." I lifted my head as strong arms wrapped around me, lifting me out of the snow. The last thing I saw before everything tilted was my father behind the window, not moving, not helping, just watching while someone else saved his daughter's life. I woke to steady beeping and the sharp smell of antiseptic. For a moment, I didn't know where I was. Then the memory of the freezing porch flashed back and the man who'd appeared through the storm. Cole. When I tried to sit up, Dr. Feldman pressed my shoulder down. "Easy. You lost more blood than you think." The baby's heartbeat pulsed strong on the monitor. Relief nearly broke me. "We stabilized your blood pressure," she said. Another episode like that could have ended very differently. I knew. The door opened and Cole stepped in. Sleeves rolled, expression tight with controlled fury. "You're awake," he said. "Good." I tried to thank him, but he pulled a chair close, steadying himself. I called Dr. Feldman on the way. The hospital notified the police. "What your family did." His jaw clenched. "They don't get to call it a misunderstanding." Shame flickered through me because a part of me still wanted my father to care. Cole saw it. "You didn't do anything wrong," he said gently. "They did." Then he reached into his briefcase and placed a familiar folder on my lap, the redevelopment project. "My project. Your MA North Star," he said. Not asking, knowing. "I didn't want Arden built to take it," I whispered. "They won't," he answered. "This is yours, and I want you beside me when we present it." For the first time, someone wasn't asking me to shrink. They were asking me to step into the light. 2 weeks later, I stood behind the velvet curtain at the Lakeshore Convention Center. The room buzzed with officials, investors, journalists. Cole told me I could back out, but truth mattered more than readiness. From backstage, I spotted my father and Ethan in the front row, identical navy suits, identical arrogance. They believed they were about to claim the project for Arden built. Cole took the stage, calm and commanding. Behind him, my renderings illuminated the screen parks woven into the waterfront mixed-income housing glass curved like the lake. Today, he began, we unveil a vision shaped by someone who has redefined how we think about community. My father straightened, preparing to rise. But Cole didn't say his name. He clicked to the next slide, a signature, mine. The lead architect, he said, is known as M.A. Northstar. Her real name is... A breathless pause. Maya Arden. A shock rippled through the crowd. Ethan dropped his phone. My father froze. Cole gestured toward me. My legs trembled. But when the lights hit, fear evaporated. I walked out and faced them, my family, the officials, the entire city. And for the first time, they had no choice but to truly see me. The applause faded into a low hum as I left the stage, but my pulse kept racing long after the lights no longer blinded me. In the corridor backstage, the sounds of the convention center felt distant, muffled, as if the world needed a moment to catch up to what had just happened. Cole found me first. He didn't touch me, didn't crowd me, just stood close enough for his presence to anchor the air around us. "You did exactly what you needed to do," he said. I nodded, but part of me was still shaking from the weight of it all. Not regret, just the magnitude of choosing myself in front of the very people who taught me to shrink. The fallout began almost immediately. News outlets dissected the clip of the announcement within hours. Commentators called it a seismic shift in Chicago's construction landscape. Others called it a long-overdue reckoning. And mixed among that noise were my father's and Ethan's attempts at damage control statements about miscommunication and family matters taken out of context. None of it landed. The city had seen enough. Within weeks, Arden Built began bleeding contracts. Investors withdrew. Banks demanded explanations. Legal inquiries circled like vultures. It wasn't a collapse brought on by revenge, but by exposure. The kind that happens when truth finally gets the oxygen it deserves. Meanwhile, my world moved in a different direction entirely. Rachel Kim, the attorney. Cole recommended met with me twice a week. She handled everything: protective filings, access to my trust statements, to the police documentation from Dr. Feldman. There was a process to escape the gravity of a family like mine, but for the first time, I wasn't navigating it alone. When the court finally granted me full authority over my mother's trust, I cried not because of the money, but because the tie binding me to my father's control had been severed cleanly. With that freedom, Northstar Studio became more than a whisper in the back of my mind. I leased a small loft in a renovated warehouse district, the kind of space with exposed brick-tall windows and room to imagine a future that didn't rely on anyone else's permission. I bought second-hand drafting tables, a whiteboard too big for the elevator, and a coffee maker that sputtered before it brewed. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. On the first day, I placed a single framed print on the wall, a rendering from the project I'd nearly lost. Beneath it, I wrote a message to myself in blue marker. No more shrinking. Standing there alone in the quiet loft, I felt something new rise in my chest. Not defiance, not anger, direction, and I knew exactly where it would lead me next. Spring crept into Chicago, slowly pretending warmth before slipping back into cold. Months had passed since the night on my father's porch, and I hardly recognized who I'd been then. My belly was full and heavy, my movements slower, but my mind felt clearer than it had in years. Luna arrived on a quiet Thursday, her first cry sharp and certain, as if she already knew the world required force to be heard. When the nurse laid her on my chest, everything else, court filings, headlines, my father's shifting messages from denial to apology, fell away. She was small, warm, undeniably real. For the first time, I didn't feel alone. The following weeks blurred into newborn rhythms and rebuilding. Northstar Studio grew from a one-woman dream into a team of 4-3 overlooked young architects and an intern who reminded me too much of my younger self. Driven, responsible, taught to shrink her own brilliance. Next came the Lighthouse Initiative. Rachel handled the nonprofit paperwork. Cole provided seed funding with a simple promise: no strings. We opened a small office 2 floors below Northstar, a place where women could ask for help without explanation. Some days it felt fragile, others powerful beyond measure. Meanwhile, the consequences for my father and Ethan unfolded slowly and publicly. Arden Built survived, but barely lost contracts, damaged reputation. Their lawyer said they'd started therapy. They sent long letters full of regrets and explanations about generational patterns and pain repeating itself. I read them. I didn't pretend they didn't exist. But forgiveness, I learned, doesn't mean access. Months later, I stood with Luna on the observation deck of our redevelopment project, watching workers move in a kind of practiced choreography. The lake glittered under the sun, and Luna's tiny hand wrapped tightly around my finger. For the first time, the world felt wide and possible. People say family is blood, maybe. But choice: who you protect, who you stand with, who you refuse to become, that's the real foundation. And at last, I was building my own.